Okay. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to our continuing session of Women's Day special. Today we're going to talk about another wonderful woman from our Vedic culture. Her name is Queen Draupadi. So we're going to go into the pastimes of Draupadi, and then we will go to the Bhagavatam. In the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, there is a little episode that happens when Srimati Draupadi loses her 5 children, and we look briefly at those shlokas and exchange. That'll tell us what kind of a devotee Draupadi is. So, the word Draupadi means the daughter of Drupada, and the word Drupada means pillar. Now, in our culture, a single person may have multiple names, and oftentimes these names are derived based on their relationships with their family members, and sometimes based on their characteristics, their qualities, and sometimes based on some of their pastimes. Actually, at birth, she was named Krishna. There are many meanings to the word Krishna. One of the meanings of the word Krishna means someone who has a dark complexion. So that was her name given at birth. Another name for Srimati Draupadi is Panchali. She came from the province called Panchala. So somebody who's from Panchala and who is a woman, you could say she's called Panchali. One more name for Draupadi is Yajnaseni. Now, Yajnaseni means, Sena means army. Yajna means sacrifice. So you could say Drupada's name was Yajnasena. Drupada is her father. So Drupada's name is Yajnasena. So a derivative of that is Yajnaseni. You could also say Yajnaseni also means someone who's actually born from a yajna, from the sacrificial fire. One more name of Draupadi is Drupada Kanya, the daughter of Drupada. And when they led their life incognito means they were in disguise, the Pandavas. She got the name of Sairandri. Sairandri means an expert mate. And Drupada's father's name was Prashata. So Draupadi is also known as Parshati, meaning granddaughter of Prashata or daughter of Prashati, because Draupadi's mother's name was Prishati. So Drupada's wife's name was Prishati. So daughter of Prishati is Parshati. Like this, she has many other names. She's also known as Agni-suta, daughter of fire. She's also known as Malini. The word Malini means, there are two meanings. One is fragrance, and the other one means a garland of flowers. King Yudhishthir used to call her Kalyani. Kalyani means one who brings fortune. She's also known as Panchavallabha, meaning beloved of the 5 Pandavas. She's also known as Pandu Sharmila or Pandu Sharmila. daughter-in-law of Pandu. So where do you find pastimes of Draupadi? In the Mahabharata. So today we're going to look at Vedavyas's Mahabharata. There are other versions that were embellished later on. We're not going to go into that. And when we go through the pastimes of Draupadi, you'll realize what is actually from Vedavyas's Mahabharata and what is not. So, to understand how Draupadi and her brother Drishtadyumna actually come from a sacrificial fire, we have to go back a little bit in time. When Drupada, her father, was a prince, and Drona was a Brahmana's young child. So Drupada and Drona went to the same guru, and they were very good friends. And children always are very innocent, and they may make a lot of innocent statements or promises because at that time they are unpolluted. Now, of course, Drona was a very poor Brahmana. So in those days, Brahmanas did not chase money. They led very austere lives. And Drupada, of course, was the son of a king, so he is used to opulence. So they were very good friends, and Drupada tells Drona, you know what, Drona, when I become the king, I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you half my kingdom, 50% of my kingdom. I will give it to you. That's what Drupada tells Drona. Children say different things. So now they're all grown up. Drona is now Dronacharya, teaching the Pandavas and the Kauravas archery. And by now, Drupada has taken on the kingdom from his father. And Drona's young son, when he goes to Gurukul, he's teased by the other children because his mother has mixed some flour with water and told him it's milk. They did not even have a cow. So the child gets teased, and he comes and tells his father and his mother, saying, you know, you are fooling me. You're mixing something with water, telling me it's milk, and then when I drink it at the school, everybody is laughing at me, saying you don't even know what milk is, etc. So Drona felt a little bit bad that his son had this experience. So he decides to approach Drupada, his childhood friend, and see if Drupada maybe can give him just a cow in charity so that his son could have milk, real milk. So he goes to the palace and he meets Drupada and tells him, Drupada, do you remember me? I'm Drona. We used to be childhood friends. We went to the Gurukul together. And at that time, Drupada insults Drona. He says, you know, don't call me your friend because friendship can only be among equals. I'm a king and you are a very poor Brahmana. So we're not even equals. We cannot be friends. And he tells him to get out of the palace. So now Drona felt quite insulted. So he comes back and he tells the Pandavas and the Kauravas this has happened. And of course, a student's role, one of the roles of the students, is to defend the honor of their teacher. So Duryodhana and the other Kauravas said, no, we'll restore your honor. We'll go and defeat this stupid Drupada and, we'll teach him a lesson, etc., etc. So Duryodhana and his brothers go and they get soundly defeated by Drupada's army and they come back dejected because they could not protect their guru's honor. They could not restore their guru's honor. So this time the Pandavas go, Arjuna goes along with his brothers. They defeat Drupada. Not only that, they tie him up and bring him to Dronacharya and say, here's the person that insulted you. You do whatever you want. So at that time, Dronacharya tells Drupada, I asked for a cow and you couldn't even consent to such a small thing. You're a king, you're supposed to give charity to a Brahmana. That's one of your important roles. So thank you very much. I will take 50% of your kingdom. And Dronacharya releases Drupada. So first Drona was insulted. Now Drupada feels insulted. So this tit for tat can go on forever if you don't learn to forgive and if you don't just move on. Anyway, so what happens is now Drupada is insulted. So he does a special fire sacrifice. He wanted to get a son for the sole purpose of killing Drona. That was his objective. His objective was to bear a son who would become such a great expert in fighting that he could kill Dronacharya. So he performs. Now, keep in mind, Drupada had other sons, but he wanted to perform a yajna just to produce one more son for this purpose alone. So the head priests are sitting there, and after the completion of the yajna, the priests instruct Prishati, who's the wife of Drupada, to consume the sacrifice offering, but she refuses and she says, just wait, I'm going to go wash myself and I'll come back. But then the two priests, the head priests, do not wait. And what they do is they take the offering that was meant for Prishati and offer it to the fire itself. And when they do that, two beings emerge. A very young, handsome young man and a beautiful young woman emerge. And the young man, of course, is Drishtadyumna, who then joins the Pandavas side. And he's the one who's designing the army formation, etc. for the Pandavas. And the second person to appear was Draupadi. Now, it just so happened that when Draupadi comes out of the fire, and of course, her name was Krishna at that time because her father kept that name because of her dark complexion. So there was an Akashvani that said that this dark complexion girl will be the first of all women, and she will be the cause of the destruction of many Kauravas. So there was a prophecy that she will be the cause of the destruction. Of course, I think we understand how she was the cause of the destruction of the Kauravas. We'll come to that pastime a little later. So anyway, that was that seemed to be predestined. In the meantime, although Dronacharya had taken 50% of the kingdom, nevertheless, Drupada wanted his son Drishtadyumna to learn the arts of fighting from Drona. So a Brahmana is not supposed to keep a grudge or vengeance, etc. That's not the nature of a Brahmana. Now, Dronacharya knew that Drupada had performed this yajna to get a son for the sole purpose of killing him. Although Dronacharya knew this, he still accepted Drishtadyumna as his student and taught him archery. So that's the stature of a Brahmana in society. Even if you're insulted, even if you know you're going to be killed by that person who you're teaching. He was so generous-hearted that Dronacharya taught Drupada's son, Drishtadyumna, all about archery. So soon thereafter, actually before we do that, we'll just go through a quick description of Draupadi as she comes out of the fire. And this is from Vedavyasa's Mahabharata. So how Vedavyas describes Draupadi as follows. The fire woman was extremely beautiful. Her eyes were black and large as lotus petals. Her complexion was dark. and her locks were blue and curly. Her nails were beautifully convex and bright as burnished copper. Her eyebrows were fair, and her bosom was deep. Indeed, she resembled the veritable daughter of a celestial born among men. So, Vedavyas is describing her beauty, that she is actually descended from the heavenly planets. So, her body gave out fragrance like that of a blue lotus, perceivable from a distance of full 2 miles. So, you could actually smell Draupadi before you could see her. That was the fragrance that was emanating from Draupadi's body. Her beauty was such that she had no equal on earth. Like a celestial herself, she could be desired in marriage by a celestial, a Danava, or a Yaksha. So this is coming from the Adi Parva section of Mahabharata, chapter 169, shloka number 3. So later on, Drupada wanted his daughter to marry Arjuna. And upon hearing that the Pandavas had actually possibly died at Varnavata, he sets up a Swayamvara contest for Draupadi to choose a husband of her choice based on a contest. The contest was to lift and string a bow and then fire 5 arrows to pierce the eye of a golden fish that was hanging down from the ceiling. But to do this, you have to do it by looking at the reflection of the fish in the water below. So the news of Draupadi's Swayamvara spreads far and wide, and many princes, along with many brahmanas, head towards Panchala, the place where the Swayamvar was supposed to take place. It just so happened that the Pandavas also had begun their journey towards Panchala at that time, along with their mother Kunti. And as they were on their way towards Panchala, they met all of these other Brahmanas. And because they themselves were in the disguise of Brahmanas, they invited the Pandavas to join them. So at the Swayamvara, nobody was able to fulfill the requirements to win the hand of Draupadi in marriage. And it was only Arjuna who was able to successfully complete the task. I mean, sometimes there are some versions that say that Draupadi actually refused to marry Karna because he was born of a low caste mother. But that is not there in Vedavyasa's Mahabharata. So in the end, Arjuna wins her hand, but then he's dressed as a Brahmin. Now the Kshatriyas who were there for the Swayamvara ceremony of Draupadi, including Karna and the other Kauravas, they all protest. Swayamvar for a Kshatriya is supposed to be a contest for Kshatriyas, not for somebody wearing a Brahmin attire. So the Kauravas and Karna, everybody begin to attack Arjuna, and Bhima comes to Arjuna's protection, and together they defeat all of the other Kauravas that they were there, because they didn't like the idea that Draupadi was won by a Brahmana and not a Kaura. It would have been a big insult for them. So anyway, Arjuna takes Draupadi home, and the way he introduces her to his mother is, "Mother, I have brought you some bhiksha, alms." And Kunti had the habit of saying that whatever, because they were begging, right? Whatever they got, that they should always share equally among the 5 brothers. So this time also, she didn't see what Arjuna was talking about. he just said, see what I have brought you. So Kunti thought he was referring to some picture or something. And so she says, share it among your brothers. So because of that, a mother's instructions is upheld. So therefore the five brothers decide to share Draupadi as a wife. And they had some agreement on how they would do that sharing of one wife. Normally, in Vedic culture, a woman marrying multiple husbands is unheard of. A man marrying multiple wives was part of our Vedic culture, and our culture shastras say that a man can marry as many wives as long as he is able to keep each wife happy. Then he can not only keep her happy but also be able to take care of her and her children. So financially, he should be in a position to take care of more than one wife. Then you're allowed to marry multiple wives. But it's very unheard of to hear a woman marrying multiple husbands. But anyway, the situation was unusual, and uh, therefore the five brothers share Draupadi. Then later on, of course, Draupadi becomes the mother of five sons, one from each of the Pandava brothers. So they are known as Upapandavas, and their names are as follows. So Prativindhya is the son that she has from Yudhishthir. Sutasoma is the son's name from Bhishma. Shrutakarma from Arjuna. Satanika from Nakula, and Shrutasena from Sakadeva. Now, before we come to the Srimad Bhagavatam, a little bit more backdrop about Draupadi and her characteristic, her role in the kingdom, and the genuinely loving, caring personality that she is. So, when it was revealed that the Pandavas had actually survived, it created a little bit of a crisis, because when news spread that perhaps the Pandavas had died in that Varnavrat, then the title of crown prince had shifted from Yudhishthir to Duryodhana. And so a little bit of an embarrassment that the Pandavas were actually there, and while they were there, Duryodhana took over that name of crown prince. So Dhritarashtra invites the Pandavas to Hastinapur and proposes that the kingdom should be divided. The Pandavas were given a particular land that was called Kandava Prastha. It is actually there was nothing there. It was like what do you call it? A sand desert. So, but then with the help of Krishna, the Pandavas become very, very successful in making it a prosperous kingdom. And they call it Indraprastha. So pretty soon, they started kind of consolidating their power and role. So this Indraprastha was considered to be the crown jewel of the kingdom that was built in the Khandava forest. And Draupadi resides there in a place called the Palace of Illusions. So Yudhishthira performs the Rajasuya Yajna along with Draupadi by his side. And it is said that Draupadi was well trained in economics, and therefore she was responsible for the treasury. She was actually the treasurer for the kingdom. The treasurer role is not a unimportant or small role. Imagine managing the country's finances. That was Draupadi's role. So you can see that women were not kept out of roles, even queens. On top of that, it is said that Draupadi would act as a liaison between the citizens and the king. So any issues, complaints, so she was like that 1-800 call for help, like a call center that you can call for help. So if citizens had any challenges, they would actually meet with Draupadi and she would help resolve some of the challenges that they had. So, and there is also a conversation with Satyabhama, the Lord's favorite wife, during their exile about her duties as a queen. So that information is also there in terms of what all were her responsibilities there. That now, when the Rajasuya Yajna was performed, Duryodhana and others were there, and they were shocked to see how thriving the kingdom was. They had given them barren land, and they turned it into such a beautiful kingdom. Of course, Duryodhana was quite jealous, and of course, when he visits the Palace of Illusions, he gets confused. He thinks land is water and water is land, and he ends up falling into the water, and he becomes drenched waist on down because of the hidden pool. Now, in the Veda Vyasa's Mahabharata, there is no mention of Draupadi laughing. However, it does say that Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva and their servants witnessed Duryodhana's fall into that little water body, and they had laughed at Duryodhana. Draupadi is not mentioned as being in the scene at all. So anyway, Duryodhana feels very insulted that the Pandavas had laughed at him. So later on, he goes back to Hastinapur and he tells his father Dhritarashtra, I cannot bear the thought of Pandavas amassing so much wealth. We gave them barren land, and just look at how successful they've been with this help of Krishna here. And everybody is bowing down to Yudhishthira, etc. So at that time, Duryodhana mentions how he observed Draupadi in her duties and responsibilities. And when he's talking to his father, he says that Queen Draupadi would serve prasadam to everybody, including anyone who was physically challenged in their kingdom. And only after everybody was served would she actually honor prasadam. Until then, she herself would not have eaten anything. And Duryodhana tells his father she does this every day. And she treats everybody with such kindness and love. So this is something that Duryodhana had observed when he was visiting Yudhishthira. He noticed some of the duties and responsibilities being performed by Draupadi. And then, of course, he feels insulted that he fell into the pool. So he tells his father, I was mocked by Arjuna, and then he can't stand the thought of Bhima laughing at him. And so this has been embellished that Draupadi laughed, etc. But it is not in Vedavyasa's version of the Mahabharata. So they decide to invite the Pandavas to a game of dice. It is said that when a Kshatriya is invited to a gambling match, it is culturally the norm for them to say yes. Although Yudhishthira knew that he had no clue how to gamble, he was not a good player at it. Neither was any of the other Pandavas. Anyway, because they were asked, they could not say no. So along with Shakuni, Duryodhana manages to get the Pandavas to Hastinapur and wins their kingdom in the process. So not only do they win the kingdom, they win all the Pandavas. So Yudhishthira puts up his brothers as part of the bet, he loses his brother, and finally he loses himself. Now, at least um, um, this is the understanding. So as the game proceeds, Yudhishthira loses things one by one. So he gambles away Sahadev, he gambles away Nakula, he gambles Arjuna away and Bhima away. And finally, Yudhishthira puts himself up and loses again. But then Duryodhana was not satisfied. Not only did he successfully get the kingdom back from the Pandavas, but then now the Pandavas were his slaves, they were his servants. But he felt that, Yudhishthira still had Draupadi. So five Pandavas were one, but not the wife. So he challenges Yudhishthira. He says, you still have one more property, your wife. And Yudhishthira shocks everybody when he puts his wife up for the bet. And to the horror of everybody else, all of the other kings watching this little gambling match going around. So sure enough, Shakuni wins. And Draupadi was horrified that her husband and husbands had done this to her. So Duryodhana then sends his charioteer. Duryodhana's charioteer's name is Pratikaman, to bring Draupadi to the court. Draupadi was not there in the court when this gambling match was going on. So the charioteer goes and talks to Draupadi. He tells her, okay, this is the gambling match has happened. Your husbands have lost. And Draupadi questions, how can Yudhishthira put me up for bet? Because he had lost himself. He had lost a kingdom. He lost himself. The minute he lost himself, he didn't have any right over me. So dharmically, he could not have put me up for sale like that as part of a gambling match. So Duryodhana hears that these are the questions that Draupadi is asking. So he gets infuriated, and that's when he sends his brother Dushasana to forcibly bring her to the court. And at that time, Dushasana drags Draupadi by her hair, and at that time, Bhima pledges to do quite a bit of harm to Dushasana. So there, Draupadi is begging all of the elders who are present for this gambling. She repeatedly asks the legality of what Yudhishthira had done. Legally, Yudhishthira lost his rights when he lost himself in the gambling match. He put himself up as a bet and he lost himself. That means he didn't own anything or anybody anymore. So at that time, nobody responds to her. Although there is a particular point where Bhishma says, I can't help you, something to do with destiny, etc. So, and to provoke the Pandavas further, what does Duryodhana do? He pats his thighs, he bares his thighs, pats it, and looking directly at Draupadi's eyes, implying that she was now his and she should come and sit on his lap. And of course, that was not the appropriate thing to do. And at this time, two brothers of Duryodhana, Yuyutsu and Vikarna, plead with the other kings to respond to the legitimacy of Draupadi's question. And the only person who speaks up about this wrongdoing is actually Vidura. Vidura says, whatever you're doing here is quite wrong. And Karna gets quite angry. He says, when Yudhishthira lost all his possessions, he also automatically lost Draupadi. He need not have staked her, because any which way the Kauravas had won the gambling match, and Draupadi would have been part of them. So at that time, Karna instigates Dushasana to disrobe her, because the minute you have lost your position and title as a king, you cannot wear all the upper garments, the what do you call it? All of the paraphernalia that normally kings and princes wear. So the Pandavas had to disrobe the top half of their body. Therefore, they wanted Draupadi to be in the same situation. She should also completely be disrobed on the top. That's when Dushasana tries to disrobe her, and Draupadi's husbands fail to protect her. At that time, Draupadi is actually praying to Krishna. And of course, Krishna helps her by sending her reams of sari, so much so that Dushasana feels intense exhaustion and he's not able to do what was asked of him. Now, as to the reason why and how Krishna actually helps her, it is said that Krishna calls Draupadi his Saki or friend. And Draupadi was always a very dear devotee to Krishna. Of course, she prays to Krishna with utmost devotion when her entreaties to her husbands actually fail. She's left with no choice but to turn to Krishna. There is actually a pastime of a discussion between Krishna and Draupadi, but it is said that earlier when Krishna had a little cut on his finger, which normally holds a Sudarshan chakra, it was Draupadi who tore off a piece of her cloth and tied the wound, and that won over Krishna's heart. Of course, there is an exchange with later on with Draupadi and the Lord, where Draupadi asks, why didn't you rescue me? Why did you allow me to go through what I did? And Krishna says, but you didn't think of me. You didn't call me first. You wanted your husbands to help you, so I'm not going to intervene. Only when your husbands failed to help you, then you thought of me. But the minute you thought of me, Draupadi, I came. I was in Dwaraka. I came right away. How did I come? In the form of the Vastra. So apparently there is some belief that this, when Draupadi puts that little piece of cloth to stop the bleeding in the Lord's finger, that was the first act of, or the origin of Rakhi. I don't know how true that is. But besides that, how did Draupadi end up with 5 husbands? There is a pastime in her previous life where she wanted exalted personalities as her husband, and therefore she is worshipping Lord Shiva. She does intense tapas. And somehow she says, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband 5 times, and therefore she gets 5 husbands. There is another pastime that says that she wanted 5 different, what do you call it, qualities. And therefore she gets 5 different husbands. So this was a boon granted to her by Lord Shiva. Now, of course, later on we'll come to the pastime in the Bhagavatam. So coming back to the story, when Draupadi is disrobed and finally Dushasana is not very successful, we said that Vikarna and Yuyutsu objected to it, but then it was only Vidura who openly criticizes Duryodhana, and the Dhritarashtra is just watching everything silently. And then later on, when Draupadi is taken to the Kauravas' chambers, at that time there are jackals that are howling, and Gandhari comes there. And she tells her husband Dhritarashtra that whatever he has done has been absolutely adharmic. And she tells Dhritarashtra, you have to undo what your sons have done. So Dhritarashtra finally intervenes after Gandhari comes, and he grants Draupadi a boon. And he asks her, ask for whatever you want, because he's now trying to make amends for something. He's afraid that he's going to lose his kingdom, lose his sons. So Draupadi asks for her husband Yudhishthira to be freed from bondage so that her son Prativindhya would not be called a slave. So Dhritarashtra says, Tatastu, fine, we will release Yudhishthira and your son as well, not to worry. But he wanted to please her even more. So he asks her, why don't you ask for another boon? So this time she very calmly says, I want you to free all the Pandavas along with their weapons. So Dhritarashtra tells her, done. I'm offering you a third boon. At that time, Draupadi tells Dhritarashtra that a Kshatriya woman can only seek two wishes. If she asks for one more, it would be a sign of her greed. So she must be very well versed in cultural norms as well, do's and don'ts of Kshatriyas. So apparently a Kshatriya woman can only ask for two wishes. So Dhritarashtra gives them back their wealth and then releases all of the Pandavas, and they all go home. Of course, later on, they have gone back to Indraprastha. Only this time they get one more invitation. And this time, it was not a staking of a kingdom or staking of people. That whoever lost this game of dice would have to go into exile for 12 years, followed by 1 year of Ajnatavas, meaning living in incognito. So again, Yudhishthira accepts the invitation. Kshatriyas cannot deny an invitation to gamble. And he loses. And therefore they go on exile for 12 years plus 1. So there is a pastime of how one day Durvasa Muni and all of his huge set of disciples come to visit the Pandavas and Draupadi as they are living in the forest. And Draupadi had this Akshaya Patra. And actually, Durvasa Muni was deliberately sent there by Duryodhana, because he knows that Durvasa Muni, if he gets upset about the smallest of things, first thing that's going to come out of his lips is a curse. So he was hoping by sending Durvasa Muni towards where the Pandavas were, somehow they will mess up, they will not receive him well, they are living a very poverty-stricken life, and therefore Durvasa Muni would end up cursing the Pandavas. That's what he wanted. So of course, when the sage enters the ashram, the brothers welcome the sage and all of his disciples and take nice care of them. At that time, Durvasa said, I'm hungry, I want something to eat. However, they had just finished eating and Draupadi was thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to feed the guests? And she was very nervous. She was thinking, I mean, before you know it, this Durvasa Muni is going to curse us. So at that time, she prays to Krishna. And the minute she prays to Krishna, Krishna comes there. And he says, give me that Akshaya Patra. And Draupadi says, but there's nothing in it. So the Lord insists, no, but give it to me. Even though it was washed and set aside, inside the vessel there was 1 grain of rice. And when Krishna takes the single grain of rice that was left in the pot, immediately Durvasa Muni and all his disciples felt like they had had a grand feast and they never came back to ask for prasadam. They left. Apparently, this is a particular incident that happens. So coming back to this time, They finished living their 12 years in exile, and then the final year in incognito. And then the war happens. And on the 18th day of the war, Dronacharya has been killed. Many of the Kauravas have been killed. And Ashwatthama decides he will do something unbelievable. The unbelievable thing is that as the 5 sons of Draupadi are sleeping, he beheads all 5 of them as they were sleeping. So that is the episode that we're actually going to go into in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this particular chapter is chapter number 7 in Canto 1, that is called The Son of Drona Punished. So it begins with Vedavyas actually beginning to compile the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he starts by talking about the end of the war. So that's how Vedavyas has actually compiled the Bhagavatam, where in Canto 1 he begins to talk about, after a few other shlokas and chapters, etc. In this particular 7th chapter, he begins to speak about the end of the Mahabharata war, and that's the shloka we'll begin. So when the respective warriors of both camps, namely the Kauravas and the Pandavas, were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and the dead warriors obtained their deserved destinations, and when the son of Dhritarashtra fell down lamenting, his spine broken, being beaten by the club of Bhimasena, the son of Dronacharya, Ashwatthama, beheaded the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi and delivered the heads as a prize to his master. Master meaning Ashwatthama approached Duryodhana and said, "See what I've done for you. I've taken revenge." Foolishly thinking that he would be pleased. But Duryodhana, however, disapproved of the highness act, and he was not pleased in the least about what Ashwatthama had done. Draupadi, the mother of the 5 children of the Pandavas, after hearing of the massacre of her sons, began to cry in distress, with eyes full of tears, trying to pacify her in her great loss. Arjuna spoke to her thus: "O gentle lady, when I present you with the head of that Brahmana, after beheading him with arrows from my Gandiva bow, I shall then wipe the tears from your eyes and pacify you. Then after burning your sons' bodies, you can take your bath standing on his head." So when a Kshatriya gets very angry and upset, they speak in just majestic, bombastic terms. I will do this and I will do that. So essentially Arjuna was saying, I will take revenge. I will behead him with my Gandiva bow. Then I will wipe your tears. Then after we have cremated our sons, then you can stand on Ashwatthama's beheaded head and take your bath. So Arjuna, who is guided by the infallible Lord as friend and driver, thus satisfied the dear lady by such statements. Then he dressed in armor and armed himself with furious weapons, and getting into his chariot, he set out to follow Ashwatthama, the son of his martial teacher. So Arjuna begins to chase Ashwatthama. Ashwatthama notices this from a distance, that his life is in danger. He begins to take away his chariot along with the horses in the opposite direction. But then suddenly his horses get tired, so he knows he doesn't have any other choice. So he thought, the only way I can protect myself is I have to release this weapon called the Brahmastra. The Brahmastra is considered to be much more than a nuclear weapon. It has the possibility to destroy everybody. So what does he do? He takes Achaman, he concentrated, he chanted the relevant hymns that would produce the Brahmastra, and he would just simply release it. The problem is Ashwatthama knew how to release it, but he didn't know how to call it back. And a great warrior, when he is going to use weapons, he should also know how to call those weapons back, especially weapons that are produced as a result of chanting mantras. So at that time, a glaring light spread in all directions. It was so fierce that Arjuna thought his own life in danger, and therefore he began to address Lord Krishna. So in the following shlokas, Arjuna is actually glorifying the Lord. And finally, he says, "My dear Lord, actually, what is happening here? I'm not able to understand this sudden bright light. Can you explain to me what's going on here?" And the Lord says, actually, this is the act of Ashwatthama, the son of Drona. He has thrown the hymns of nuclear energy, Brahmastra, and he does not know how to retract the glare. He has helplessly done this, being afraid of imminent death. Then Krishna is telling Arjuna, only another Brahmastra can counteract this weapon. Since you are expert in the military science, subdue this weapon's glare with the power of your own weapon. Arjuna is saying, I'm being blinded. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. And Krishna says, well, you know everything. So just release your Brahmastra to control the other weapon's glare. And then he will then tell Arjuna to also call it back. So Sri Suta Goswami is sitting with the Naimisharanya sages. So Suta Goswami is actually narrating the Bhagavatam in Canto 1. Hearing this from the personality of Godhead, Arjuna touched water for purification, and after circumambulating Lord Krishna, he cast his Brahmastra weapon to counteract the other one. So when the rays of the two Brahmastras combined, a great circle of fire, like the disk of the sun, covered all outer space and the whole firmament of planets. I don't know how many of you have watched the video of the Hiroshima atomic bomb being dropped on Japan. If you watch that video, you can see a circle of fire just spreading outwards, it looks like a disk. So it's interesting that is what is being described here, a great circle of fire, like the disk of the sun. All the population of the three worlds was scorched by the combined heat of the weapons. Everyone was reminded of the Samvartaka fire, which takes place at the time of annihilation. Thus, seeing the disturbance of the general populace and the imminent destruction of the planets, Arjuna at once retracted both the Brahmastra weapons as Lord Sri Krishna desired. So now that the weapon was taken care of, he needs to go kill Ashwatthama. So he finds him, binds him up like as if he was an animal, and he wanted to take him to the military camp where Draupadi was. At that time, the Lord intervened, and he spoke to Arjuna in an angry tone. Lord Krishna said, "Oh Arjuna, you should not show mercy by releasing this relative of a Brahmana." So Ashwatthama was not a Brahmana by birth. He was raised by Dronacharya. So Krishna says, don't show mercy to a relative of a Brahmana, for he has killed innocent boys in their sleep. A person who knows the principles of religion does not kill an enemy who is careless, intoxicated, insane, asleep, afraid, or devoid of his chariot, nor does he kill a boy, a woman, a foolish creature, or a surrendered soul. So the Lord is telling Arjuna, reminding him, these are the rules, ethical matters that all Kshatriyas adhere to. Obviously, the Ashwatthama has violated all kinds of dharma. How can you kill young children as they're sleeping? So a cruel and wretched person who maintains his existence at the cost of others' lives deserves to be killed for his own well-being. Otherwise, he will go down by his own actions. Remember, in one of our previous sessions, we said, if Arjuna were to ask Krishna, why is it okay for me to kill my relatives, my guru, my grandfather. And Krishna would have said, sometimes killing is the best way of putting a stop to the sinful activities of that person. Their sinful activities end, and in their next life, they can start fresh. So that's what Krishna is saying here. That sometimes you have to kill for the well being of that own person. Otherwise, he will go down by his own actions, which means if you allow them to continue to live, they will commit even more atrocities, and their future lives uh, will be in even more danger of degrading consciousness. And then Krishna is telling Arjuna, I have personally heard you promise Draupadi that you would bring forth the head of the killer of her sons. This man is an assassin and murderer of your own family members. Not only that, but he has also dissatisfied his master. So Krishna is kind of goading Arjuna to fight and finish this business once and for all. Kill this Ashwatthama. Not only has he done something abominable, by doing it, he has dissatisfied Duryodhana, his master. He is but the burnt remnants of his family. Kill him immediately. So Suta Goswami tells the sages as he's narrating this pastime, although Krishna, who was examining Arjuna and religion, encouraged Arjuna to kill the son of Dronacharya, Arjuna, a great soul, did not like the idea of killing him, although Ashwatthama was a heinous murderer of Arjuna's family members. So Arjuna is not listening to Krishna this time. He continues to take Ashwatthama to the camp, and there he hands over Ashwatthama to Draupadi, who was still weeping about her 5 sons' death. So Sri Suta Goswami said, Draupadi then saw Ashwatthama, who was bound with ropes like an animal and silent for having enacted the most inglorious word. So Ashwatthama did not say a word. Due to her female nature and due to her being naturally good and well behaved, she showed him due respects as a Brahmana. So Draupadi offered all respects to Ashwatthama because she considered him to be higher class than Kshatriya, Brahman. She could not tolerate Ashwatthama's being bound by ropes. And being a devoted lady, she said, release him, for he is a Brahmana, our spiritual master. The Brahmanas are considered to be the intellectual guiders for society. So Brahmanas are always in the position of guru because they are well read in Shastras, they've understood Brahman, etc. So she's asking that Arjuna should not have tied him up. He's in higher class than us. We are Kshatriyas, we always bow down to Brahmanas. So it was by Dronacharya's mercy that you learned the military art of throwing arrows and the confidential art of controlling weapons. So now she's telling Arjuna, how could you do this to the son of your teacher? You hold your teacher in such high regard. Everything that you've learned from him, even though Dronacharya is dead, she tells Dronacharya is certainly still existing, being represented by his son. His wife Kripi did not undergo a sati with him because she had a son. So Kripi did not enter the funeral pyre of her husband because she had a son left behind. So how could you kill the son? O most fortunate one who know the principles of religion, it is not good for you to cause grief to glorious family members who are always respectable and worshipful. So Draupadi is saying, if we are dharmic, we would not inflict pain on Kripi. Kripi is respectful and worshipful. We should not cause her any harm. My lord, do not make the wife of Dronacharya cry like me. I am aggrieved for the death of my sons. She need not cry constantly like me. So This is Draupadi's empathy. She's saying, I as a mother have lost my 5 sons. I know what it feels like. I certainly don't want to inflict this suffering on another mother. That too, the wife of your teacher. If the kingly administrative order, being unrestricted in sense control, offends the Brahmana order and enrages them, then the fire of that rage burns up the whole body of the royal family and brings grief upon them all. So she is reminding Arjuna that his proper duty here is to offer respect, that if he loses his self control and out of vengeance and out of going into a rage, kills somebody in the Brahmana caste, then that is going to cause self destruction of their own royal family. And who supports Draupadi in this argument? Yudhishthir Maharaj, who said, yes, what Draupadi is saying is as per scriptures, that one must have mercy and one must not practice duplicity just because somebody else has practiced duplicity. So Nakula and Sahadev also agree that Draupadi is right. Not only that, Satyaki, Arjuna, and Lord Krishna agree that Draupadi is right. And all the other ladies also agreed that Yudhishthir is right, because Yudhishthir was supporting Draupadi and everybody else was supporting Yudhishthir. One person is left out. Now, Krishna earlier had said kill. Now he's saying, I agree with Yudhishthir, what Yudhishthir is saying. So Bhima, however, did not accept. So he got very angry and he said, you should kill this guy. I mean, he murdered them for no reason. By murdering them, he didn't fulfill anything special for his master. So now Krishna has heard Bhima's side and Krishna speaks. So he tells everybody gathered there, a friend of a Brahmana is not to be killed. But if he is an aggressor, he must be killed. So Krishna is not accepting that Ashwatthama is a Brahman, but a friend of a Brahman. All these rulings are in the scriptures and you should act accordingly. You have to fulfill your promise to your wife and you must also act to the satisfaction of Bhimasena and me. Now the Lord has put Arjuna in a situation. He said, Bhima wants you to kill him. I also want you to kill him. But at the same time, you have to satisfy what your wife is saying, what Yudhishthir Maharaj is saying. You have to act as per scriptures. But then remember, you have to fulfill your promise to your wife, you have to fulfill your promise to me. Now, how is Arjuna going to handle this? So Suta Goswami explains. Just then, Arjuna could understand the motive of the Lord by his equivocal orders, and thus with his sword, he severed both hair and jewel from the head of Ashwatthama. He had already lost his bodily luster due to infanticide. And now, moreover, having lost the jewel from his head, he lost even more strength. Thus he was unbound and driven out of the camp. He was released. His hair was shaved off. His jewelry on the top of his head was removed. And Ashwatthama became weak, apparently. But when we read a couple of days ago in the 8th chapter, what does Ashwatthama do? He releases the Brahmastra again because he thought, let me finish whatever I needed to finish. There is one more person who's remaining in the Pandava dynasty. The son of Subhadra and Arjuna, Abhimanyu's wife, was pregnant and she was carrying Parikshit in her womb. So the entire Bhagavatam begins with the end of the Mahabharata and begins with Parikshit Maharaj. Because the whole Bhagavatam is a conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami. So cutting the hair from his head, depriving him of his wealth and driving him from his residence, are the prescribed punishments for the relative of a Brahmana. There is no injunction for killing the body. So as per Shastra, friend of a Brahmana violates dharmic principles, then you have to cut off, shave his head, deprive him of his wealth and set him free. Thereafter, the sons of Pandu and Draupadi, overwhelmed with grief, performed the proper rituals for the dead body of their relatives. So here you can see through this episode, through this particular pastime, how Draupadi was well versed in Shastra, well versed in scriptures. She challenged the legality of Yudhishthir Maharaj putting her up for bet. She requested, she requested for a response from the elders, and the only person who responded was Vidura. But then Vidura did not have any position to take any action, unfortunately. So even Bhishma doesn't come to protect her. He just says that, the path of morality is very, very subtle. And sometimes even the most wise people fail to understand how it actually operates. So through this process, we've also understood, Gandhari also understood that what her husband and her sons had done was against Shastra. Gandhari is also considered to be a devotee of the Lord. But then this is the challenge. Sometimes men lose sight of things and women have to bring them back and ground them in reality. Now, in the Narada and Vayu Puranas, it is said that Draupadi was a composite avatar of various goddesses. Shamala is the wife of Dharma. Then Bharati is the wife of Vayu. Shachi is the wife of Indra. Usha is the wife of the Ashwinis. And hence she marries the earthly counterparts in the form of the 5 Pandavas. It is also said that Brahma had cursed Parvati and the 4 goddesses to take human birth. And Parvati resolves that curse by being born as one woman, but with multiple facets in that one woman. Draupadi was not afraid to fight injustice. So when she saw injustice, she would stand up for it. So this reflects, it is said, her nature of having that Shakti potency. But at the same time, Draupadi also demonstrated her subservience to her husband. Even though she could have protected herself from Jayadratha and Jatasura, she waits to be rescued. At other times, she shows her cleverness by hiding their true identity to kill Kichaka, where Bhima has to kill Kichaka. So it is said that there is another Shastra that says that she had a curse of having to be born 5 times because she had for imprisoning Indras. So first time she takes birth as Vedavati, who was cursed by Ravana. Ravana, one time he's flying over and he sees Vedavati and tries to capture her. And when he touches her hair, she cuts off her hair and she curses him, saying, "Next time I will kill you myself." So then she comes as Maya Sita in her next life, Vedavati, to take revenge. So this Maya Sita is the one that is actually gets kidnapped by Ravana, not the real Sita. Real Sita is taken away by uh, Agnidev and his wife Swaha. So the real Sita is actually hidden. It's Maya Sita who's actually kidnapped. The third time she comes as Damayanti. And the fourth time she comes as Nalayani, where she marries sage Mutkala. And in the fifth birth, she comes as Draupadi. So it is said that in Draupadi, we find a composite avatar of Kali, Parvati, Shachi, Shyamala, Usha, Bharati, Shri, Swaha, the 8 goddesses. And we said that Krishna had a very special place in his heart for Draupadi. So much so, he opposes her marriage to Karna and promotes her marriage to Arjuna. And Draupadi exemplifies bhakti. She had so much faith in Lord Krishna. And just by praying to him, she received his mercy and his benediction and his protection. So after the war, it is said that Draupadi, along with her husbands, they ruled for 36 years. And when her husbands decided to retire, she joins them. And of course, there's that entire story how one by one the Pandavas lose their body, beginning with Draupadi. So this is the glorious pastimes of Queen Draupadi, which leaves us barely 10 minutes to talk about Ishvara, which means we will not do Ishvara today. We will cover 2 topics tomorrow. Ishvara and Prakriti together we will cover tomorrow. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us.